This is a continuation of a talk-through of the entire TCS, or Tactical Combat Series rules, version 4.01. Rules, section 18.0, Artillery. Artillery missions are fired during the aircraft and artillery phase. During the appropriate sub-phase, players place all their artillery missions and then roll for each mission on the artillery adjustment table. After all artillery missions have been adjusted, the players execute all attacks, resolving each hex completely before moving to the next hex. Each hex is attacked by one combined area fire strength, and each barrage marker attacks each point target on the artillery point fire table. Artillery missions are never need to be plotted in advance, unless required by a specific game. Ignore called fire delays listed in older TCS games. 18.1 General Artillery Rules. Unless specified otherwise, artillery can hit targets anywhere on any map. A battery can execute one HE, continuous fire, fast fire, or smoke mission in a single turn, plus one Illume mission. The number of guns in a battery has no effect on the battery's abilities or ammunition consumption, exception see 24.6 on-map artillery. Artillery fires cannot be cancelled after being announced and placed. 18.2 Ammunition. Each scenario gives the ammunition available in the form of battery fires, which is defined as the quantity of ammunition needed to fire one mission. Battery fires are given as HE, high explosive, smoke, or Illume, illumination types. Early TCS games, numbers 2-01 through 2-05, allotted ammunition differently, divide their HE and smoke ammunition allotments by 4, but leave their Illume allotments the same. Players must keep a running record of their ammunition remaining by type and caliber. Delete used ammunition the moment it is fired. A player can never use more total battery fires than he has available, either batteries or ammunition. Each mission can consist of only one ammunition type. A battery barrage marker costs one battery fire of ammunition, whether firing a normal HE mission or a continuous fire mission. A battalion barrage marker, and hence mission, requires 3 battery fires of ammunition. Fast fire missions cost triple the amount of ammunition for the type of mission being fired. 8.3 Mission Execution. 1. Place new missions. Each player, in initiative order, first removes his own continuous fire missions from the previous turn, and then places the barrage or Illume markers of all the artillery missions that he wishes to fire in the target hex or hexes of his choice, no more than one barrage marker per hex. At this point, the player must declare each mission type. Illume missions are not adjusted. They are automatically successful, and artillery Illume markers just placed are now functioning and can be used for adjusting other missions. 2. Adjustment. In initiative order, each player rolls for his missions on the artillery adjustment table in any order desired. Barrage markers without a loss from a valid observer are automatically a no-shoot. 3. Fire for effect. Replace successful smoke missions with level 2 smoke markers then conduct all attacks against occupied hexes. Attack every hex in or adjacent to an attack zone that contains area targets and B targets with the combined total of all barrage markers of both players that affect the hex using the fire table. Any point targets in the attack zone of a barrage marker are attacked on the artillery point fire table. In initiative order, make any morale checks or vehicle morale checks only after all attacks have been executed but before barrage markers are removed. Each player conducts the attacks against opposing stacks, regardless of whose artillery is affecting the hex. 4. Remove barrage markers. Remove all barrage markers that are not continuous fire missions from the map. 18.4 Observing. All missions except Illume missions require an observer with an unblocked loss to the target hex. Identify the observing unit for the mission when it is announced. Unless restricted by the game rules, any unit from any organization can observe for any artillery mission. The observer must be in fire mode and have an unblocked loss to the target hex. The observer cannot be suppressed or paralyzed. Any hex with invisibility and loss of the observer must be targeted regardless of the presence. Again, any hex with invisibility and loss of the observer unit may be targeted regardless of the presence or absence of enemy units in or near the target hex. Illumination missions do not need observers and thus can be fired at any hex on the map. 18.5 Mission Types. HE missions. This is the most common type of artillery mission, dumping several sheaves in rapid succession on a target hex. An HE mission doubles the printed fire strength of the barrage marker. The attack zone of a battery HE mission is the hex in which the barrage marker is located. Hexes adjacent to an attack zone are attacked at half the strength of the attack zone. Barrage markers for HE missions are removed at the end of the aircraft and artillery phase. Battalion fire missions. A battalion fire mission is an HE mission where all batteries from the same artillery battalion fire together and expend ammo. Being part of a battalion fire mission uses up a battery's mission for that turn. The attack zone of a battalion fire mission is the target hex and the surrounding 6 hexes. In older TCS games with generic barrage markers, when you are determining the fire strength of the artillery attack zone for a battalion with mixed caliber tubes, use the smallest caliber in the battalion. More recent games have the combined battalion fire strength printed on each battalion fire marker. Smoke missions. An artillery battery, not a battalion, can use smoke ammunition to fire a smoke mission. No special requirements exist, simply use smoke ammo in place of HE and fire the mission normally. Roll on the artillery adjustment table. A smoke mission is successful on any result other than a no-shoot. A smoke mission can scatter if the artillery adjustment table calls for that result. For characteristics of smoke, see 19.0. Illume missions. An artillery battery can use illume missions to light the battlefield at night. An illume mission does not count as a battery's mission for the turn. To fire an illume mission, simply place the illume marker directly into the desired target hex during subphase 3. Place new missions. (18.6) Mission modifiers. HE missions, both battery and battalion, may be modified as below. Fast fire missions. Only guns of 122mm caliber or smaller can fire a fast fire mission. Declare the mission, when the marker is placed, to be a fast fire mission. Expend triple the battery fires you normally would for the size of mission desired. Execute the mission as an HE mission, except that the fire strength of the barrage marker is doubled and there is a modifier on the artillery point fire table. Yes, this means that fast fire HE missions have quadruple or 4 times the printed fire strength of the barrage marker. Continuous fire missions. A continuous fire mission spreads the fire out over time rather than trying to plaster the target in one swoop. The barrage marker remains on the map for the duration of the turn and is removed during the next aircraft and artillery phase. A continuous fire mission consumes 1 battery fire per battery and attacks with the fire strength printed on the barrage marker. A continuous fire mission may be combined with a fast fire mission and a battalion fire mission, combining the characteristics of each. A battalion-sized, fast-fire, continuous fire mission, therefore, would consume 9 battery fires of HE ammo and would attack at double the fire strength printed on the barrage marker. Like smoke, continuous fire barrage markers block line of sight. Rocket mission. Rocket artillery must always scatter from its target hex and does not use the adjustment table. Rocket artillery is always a simple HE mission. It cannot execute continuous or fast fire missions. Rocket artillery attacks only affect the hexes in the attack zone. Adjacent hexes not in the actual attack zone are not affected by rocket artillery. To determine scatter, roll 2 dice, a red one for direction and a white one for distance. Scatter the barrage marker the number of hexes equal to the distance roll in the direction indicated by the scatter direction diagram on the map. Rocket artillery never lands directly on its target hex. Because rocket artillery can only be fired as an HE mission, the doubled fire strength is printed directly on the barrage marker. For the first games in the series, the rocket artillery attack zones and area fire strength are given below. In later games, game-specific rules and or barrage markers indicate the area fire strength and attack zone for rocket artillery. So for Bloody 110, the Nebelwerfer fires have an attack zone with a radius of 5 hexes and an area fire strength of 20, double to 40 for HE. From the game Objective Schmidt, none. And Omaha, from the game Omaha, the LCTR fires have an attack zone with a radius of 8 hexes and an area fire strength of 30, doubled to 60 for HE. 18.6 Adjustment. Adjustment determines whether a mission scatters from its intended target hex and whether it uses its good shoot attack values or its bad shoot attack values. This, by the way, that battalion shoot or battalion mission, good. Its attack strength is 20. On the back is the side used for a battalion shoot or mission, bad, a bad shoot, and attacks with a attack strength of 9. Adjustment is performed on the artillery adjustment table. After both players have placed all their barrage markers, each player, in initiative order, rolls on the artillery adjustment table and places remaining barrage markers on their good shoot or bad shoot sides. Scatters are executed at this time too. Attacks are executed only after all barrages have been adjusted. Rocket artillery always gives a good shoot and always scatters. Do not use the adjustment table for rocket fires. Artillery adjustment table. Find the base adjustment value for the firing artillery. Games published with version 4.0 rules will usually list this in the scenario information. Otherwise, look up the nationality on the artillery adjustment table. Roll 2 dice, 11 to 66, and cross-index the dice roll with the adjusted row of the firing unit. This is an example. Here is the TCS charts and tables page 2. The sheet label is artillery spotting ET rolls. These, by the way, are the pictorial examples of what we just talked about the attack zone and the adjacent hexes. So for a battery fire mission, the attack zone is only the target hex. And for a battalion fire mission, the attack zone is the target hex and the 6 adjacent hexes. And again, we consider the adjacent hexes from that attack zone. This is how we adjust the barrage strength. So with a barrage marker for this is a Soviet battalion barrage marker laid on its good shoot side. So barrage strength of 20. This means that when in the attack zone, again, the highlighted, well, this is a battalion fire, right? This is a battalion fire. So we look at a battalion fire mission. The 7 hexes highlighted are the attack zone. So within those 7 hexes, we compute 2 times the firepower if it's an HE mission, or 20 times 2 for 40. And then adjacent to the attack zone, it's just the firepower if it's an HE mission, so that's 20. So it attacks 40 in the 7 center hexes, and it attacks at 20 in each of the adjacent hexes. For continuous fire, it's just 1/2 down from that. So for continuous fire, it's 20, or the firepower 20 in the attack zone, 1/2 the firepower in the adjacent hexes, or 10. Fast fire missions, 122 millimeters guns or smaller, pay 3 times the ammunition. Firepower above is 2 times. So all of these are doubled for fast fire missions. Now, we were just talking about the artillery adjustment table. Again, it uses columns here, numbered columns, and below the numbered columns we have a complete 11 through 66 spread for a dice roll. And as usual, the overall result is to the far right of the column, and it can be no shoot, scatter, bad shoot, or good shoot. Now the starting column, this is the default starting column we were just talking about. Starting column if not otherwise given. Again, what we just talked about, these might be superseded by game rules. So we have US start on the 11 column, Commonwealth and German start on the 10 column, other nationalities start on the 9 column, Soviet and Japanese start on the 8 column. Now this, here's a good example of where for a Frozen Hell, TCS game number 12, the game-specific rules have a section for Russian, it says 3.0, right here, 3.0 Russian special rules, 3.1 artillery, and the very first thing is use column 7 for artillery spotting for fire from the 354th Artillery Regiment on the artillery spotting adjustment table. So right there, you're given a rule to supersede the game rules basic. So the basic game rules have the Soviets on the 8 column starting, but when playing a Frozen Hell, you're told by the game-specific rules that the Soviets are actually starting on the 7 column, or one worse. So that's all of what we just talked about there. Right there. No, okay, so now we go to no shoot. There we go. No shoot. Remove the marker from the map and return the ammunition to the player's pool. Nothing happened. Scatter. Roll on the artillery scatter table to see. Here's the artillery scatter table. We have 1 to 3 is 1 hex, 4 to 5 is 2 hexes, 6 opposing player may put it in any hex within 3. Roll 2 dice, 1 for direction, use diagram on the game map, and 1 for distance. To see where the mission lands, on a roll of 1 to 3, the attack scatters 1 hex. Roll a die to determine direction. On a roll of 4 or 5, the attack scatters 2 hexes. Again, roll a die to determine direction. On a 6, the opposing player places the mission in any hex desired within 3 hexes. It does not have to scatter in a straight line. All missions which scatter are executed as bad shoots. So if this mission scatters, you're going to determine direction, distance, you're going to move it according to that procedure, and don't forget that it is automatically a bad shoot, so you will never execute a scattered mission on the good side of the barrage marker. Bad shoot. Flip the barrage marker to the bad shoot side and use its bad shoot values when executing attacks. Good shoot. Leave the barrage marker with the good shoot side up and use its good shoot value when executing attacks. 18.8 Artillery barrage markers and fire resolution. After all fires have been adjusted, players execute their own smoke missions and then execute attacks on enemy hexes in initiative order. Some early TCS games do not come with game-specific artillery barrage markers. For those games, use the generic artillery barrage markers included with the game, each side taking a different color. Immediately after completing subphase 4, adjustment, and before any artillery attacks are executed, players with A targets or non-vehicle B targets in fire mode currently in or adjacent to an artillery attack zone may, in initiative order, voluntarily self-suppress any of these units by placing a suppressed marker on all eligible units in the hex. This is actually very important, and it makes a lot of sense considering the scale here, considering the time, hex, and unit scale. It's very important that when your forces, when your opponent so after adjustment, so you have an idea of where the fire is coming in. If you have especially important units, you need to make an important decision before the attacks are executed to voluntarily self-suppress. On the one hand, you will pay the various costs of being suppressed, but on the other hand, you will be less vulnerable to the indirect fire. It's a very important decision to make. After all missions have been resolved, both players remove all barrage markers that are not continuous fire missions. While on the map, barrage markers automatically attack any unit or stack each time it moves into a hex in or adjacent to their attack zone. Such attacks only affect the moving units. Units already in the hex have no effect on the area. That is, do not add their stacking value and are not affected by it. Apply any road movement modifiers if applicable. 18.9 Indirect fire versus point targets. Artillery rolls on the artillery point fire table to attack point targets. So we are talking about the artillery point fire table right here. Roll 2 dice and modify total as above. A result of 10 plus destroys the target. So we have +1 for fast fire, -1 for bad shoot, -1 for target and move mode, -1 for continuous fire, and -1 for 90mm or smaller. Roll 2 dice for each point target, step, not B-type targets, in each hex for each barrage marker attacking it. If the modified roll is greater than or equal to the number indicated on the artillery point fire table, destroy the target. Make this same attack roll once per target step per hex whenever a moving point target enters a barrage marker's attack zone. A missed dice roll on the artillery point fire table has no effect. Immediately after subphase 4 adjustment, players with vehicle units currently in the attack zone of a barrage marker may, in initiative order, change any of these vehicles to move mode. 18.10 Overwatch during aircraft and artillery phase. Overwatch triggers are generated normally during the aircraft and artillery phase. Movement-based Overwatch triggers can occur during the aircraft and artillery phase from units conducting SYRs. Save yourself retreats. Conduct these Overwatch fires normally according to 15.1 alpha, including Overwatch return fire. When on-map artillery fires an artillery mission, this fire offers a fire-based Overwatch trigger at 1 hex containing an on-map artillery unit that participated in the mission. Conduct this fire-based Overwatch after the artillery mission has been executed. If an on-map artillery battery is firing a continuous fire mission, and because of this Overwatch fire, fewer than 2 non-suppressed, non-paralyzed steps remain, remove the continuous fire barrage marker. When an AA gun fires against a sortie. This fire offers a single fire-based Overwatch trigger at the hex containing the AA gun that fired. Conduct this fire-based Overwatch immediately before the sortie is executed, although the AA modifier is applied even if the AA gun is eliminated or suffers a morale result. So that is 18.0 artillery. 19.0 smoke. Smoke blocks loss and gives a modifier on some tables. Again, older smoke markers and newer smoke markers. Smoke effects. A smoke marker creates an infinitely high loss obstacle that affects the entire hex and all its hex sides. Any number of smoke markers can be in one hex at one time, but multiple smoke markers in the same hex give no additional effect. Units can always see into or out of a hex containing smoke for any purpose, including observing an Overwatch and Overwatch trigger spotting. However, units can never see through such a hex. Smoke markers may not be placed in an all-water hex. Smoke markers which scatter into an all-water hex are treated as no-shoot. Smoke adds +1 movement point to the cost to enter a hex. Not included on the basic terrain effects chart. Smoke reduction. 19.2. In each cleanup phase, first remove all level 1 smoke barrage markers. Remove smoke 1 markers. And then flip all level 2 markers, smoke barrage markers, to level 1 smoke barrage markers. At the beginning of his action phase, each player removes any mortar and infantry gun smoke markers that he placed during the previous turn. Smoke markers. Artillery missions place smoke markers only when smoke missions are fired. Each smoke mission generates 1 level 2 smoke barrage marker in the attack zone hex. Treat all hexes adjacent to a smoke barrage marker as also containing a regular smoke marker. A smoke marker placed by a mortar or infantry gun fills only the hex that the marker itself occupies. And that is smoke. Rule Section 20, movement. Players can move all, some, or none of their units during their friendly action phase. If a moving unit triggers Overwatch fire, the players immediately follow the Overwatch cycle for that trigger. The unit can continue moving only after the cycle ends. Only units in move mode can move. Units that move cannot fire in SFA later in the same phase. Units can move individually or in stacks. Stacks for movement are formed when units begin moving. A unit or stack must complete its movement before another unit or stack moves. Exception: vehicle impulses. Units may not voluntarily split off from a stack during movement, though sometimes a stack may be broken up due to combat and morale checks. Each unit moves along a contiguous path of hexes in any direction or set of directions, using its movement allowance to pay the movement point cost of each hex and hex side according to the game-specific terrain effects chart. A unit cannot expend more movement points than its movement allowance. Exception: if otherwise able to move, a unit can always spend its entire movement allowance to move 1 hex in its action phase into non-prohibited terrain, regardless of the movement point cost. Consider this a minimum movement rule. Units cannot save unused movement points from turn to turn, or transfer them from unit to unit. The only time that the movement of one friendly unit assists another is when carriers and vehicles act as transports. Players can move units as they see fit as long as they do not violate either the letter or the spirit of the unit's op sheet or failure instructions. Units marked TO, tow only, in place of a movement allowance, cannot move under their own power and must be towed. If they are required to move by themselves, for example in SYR, destroy them instead. These units have an assumed movement allowance of 2 to be used solely for mode change and proportioning movement with respect to carriers. Units cannot enter the same hex as enemy units, except in assault or overrun combat. Destroy units forced to violate this rule. Important note: units can conduct an assault or overrun as a stack only if the stack has existed since the beginning of the current action phase, not vehicle impulse. 20.1 Terrain effects on movement. Terrain determines the movement point cost of various hexes and hex side features as given on the terrain effects on movement chart. Each game has its own terrain effects on movement chart. Use the basic terrain effects when playing earlier TCS games without a game-specific chart. The movement point cost of a hex is the entry cost of the hex plus the cost of any hex side feature crossed to enter it. Certain map features may not be listed on the terrain effects on movement chart. These have no effect on movement. Elevation changes. Units which cross a solid contour line, including any solid contour line that runs through the center dot of the hex that the units are entering, but excluding any solid contour lines that runs through the center dot of the hex being exited, must pay an additional +1 movement point, or MP, for each solid contour line crossed. Using road movement negates this cost. Some TCS games also have broken contour lines, usually representing 10-meter contour intervals rather than the standard 20-meter intervals. These are used to determine elevation for loss purposes, but do not add to movement costs. Vehicle, carrier, and B-target weapons units may not enter a hex containing more than one solid contour line or cross more than one solid contour line when moving to an adjacent hex, except when using road movement. Count any solid contour line running through the center dot of the hex being entered, but do not count any solid contour line running through the center dot of the hex being exited. Bottlenecks. Bottlenecks are features such as bridges that channel movement within a hex or hex side. Bridges and minefield breaches are always bottlenecks. Each game specifies any additional bottleneck features applicable to that game. Units entering a hex or crossing a hex side with a bottleneck feature generate an extra movement-based Overwatch trigger in addition to the normal movement-based Overwatch trigger that the movement itself generates, so that potentially the opponent could fire at this stack twice, even with the same units if desired. Resolve such double Overwatch fires in sequence, resolving the first Overwatch fire completely before conducting the next one. Units using roads and road-like features, trails, etc., ignore the movement point costs of the other terrain features and contours in the hex or along the hex side. This only applies to units that are following the road's path from hex to hex. Moving along a road makes the unit vulnerable to negative modifiers in relation to spotting and Overwatch fires. To avoid these penalties associated with moving on the road, units can move, paying the full non-road entry costs of hexes and hex sides and move off-road. Exception. Units using wheeled or tracked movement may not enter a hex using off-road movement if they have to cross more than one solid contour line or enter prohibited terrain to do so. Certain hexes and hex sides are prohibited. No unit can enter a prohibited hex or cross a prohibited hex side unless using a road or road-like feature. Destroy any unit forced to do so. If more than one terrain type, each with a different MP cost, exists, within a hex, apply only the most costly. Add the cost of any hexside features that a unit must cross to enter the hex to the cost of the most expensive terrain in the hex to determine the hex's total movement point cost. Slow-go terrain and blocks. Slow-go terrain and blocks are no longer used. Woods, forests, and woods map symbols sometimes occupy only part of a hex. A hex is considered to be forest or woods for movement and combat if any part of the hex is covered by the symbol. The actual location of the symbol determines its loss effects. 20.2 Vehicle Impulses. While as a general rule each unit or stack must complete its movement before proceeding to the next unit stack, vehicle units have increased flexibility since they operate at a much higher tempo than do foot units. Stacks consisting solely of vehicles and units mounted on them may split their actions into 3 impulses per turn, which can be executed in any order desired. That is, a player may execute 1 impulse for a stack, then move some other units and come back to the stack to execute the remaining 2 impulses later in the action phase. Vehicle units which fire as part of an SFA, however, may not conduct vehicle impulses. A vehicle impulse may consist of movement, changing to fire mode, or conducting a PFA. Units conducting a movement impulse may move with 1/3 their normal movement allowance. Any remaining fractional movement points may be used in the last impulse. A vehicle using impulses could, for example, move in its first impulse, change to fire mode in its second impulse, and then fire a PFA to complete its 3 impulses in an action phase. A stack may execute 2 consecutive movement impulses at once, using the total of their MPs for both impulses, rounded normally. Once the MP expenditure exceeds the MPs for 1 impulse, a new impulse is considered to have begun for Overwatch purposes. Changing to move mode does not cost any MPs and may be done in any movement impulse. Changing to fire mode requires an entire impulse. Vehicles using impulse movement may not move in the same stack with any units not using impulse movement. Exception: carried units do not count against this restriction. Dismounted infantry and vehicles moving together must begin the action phase stacked together and cannot use vehicle impulses. If vehicles using impulse movement move into a hex containing other vehicles, these vehicles may form a new stack and move together in another impulse if desired. In a newly combined vehicle stack, the number of impulses expended thus far is that of the vehicle in the stack which has expended the most impulses. So that is section 20.0 movement. Now section 21.0 minefields. Minefields can be used to inhibit enemy movement into an area or to channel the enemy into a kill zone. Once in place, minefields attack both sides in the same manner. There are no friendly minefields. Units using foot movement to enter a minefield are attacked with an area fire strength of 18, modified for stacking only. Roll 2 dice for each step using vehicle movement to enter a minefield hex, destroying the step on a result of 8+. Minefields only attack units when they enter the minefield hex, not when they exit, nor if they simply remain in the hex. Do not use the dummy minefields found in earlier TCS games. Laying mines. Laying mines before the game begins, if given in the scenario setup, or whenever a prepared defense op sheet implements. When laying mines before play begins, the side that sets up first cannot place them in any hex in which enemy units can set up. When a prepared defense op sheet implements, the player can place 1 minefield for every 2 infantry platoons on the op sheet rounded down. Place minefields the instant the op sheet implements anywhere within 4 hexes of the 2 platoons that generated the minefield. The hex must also be at least 5 hexes away from the nearest enemy unit. Crossing minefields. Units pay 2 additional movement points to enter a minefield hex. After they undergo any overwatch fire triggered by their movement and/or an artillery attack, the minefield attacks them as described above, after which they may freely exit the hex. Enemy units occupying the minefield hexes may be assaulted normally, although the assaulting units must undergo an attack by the minefield when they enter the hex. Breaching. Breaches allow units to enter minefield hexes without being attacked by them. Dismounted infantry units only may attempt to breach a minefield if they begin their action phase in or adjacent to a minefield hex and the minefield hex is not occupied by enemy units. Units which attempt to breach a minefield may not move, change mode, or participate in an SFA or AT role. Only non-paralyzed, non-suppressed, dismounted infantry units can breach minefields. Such a unit must begin the phase in or adjacent to the minefield hex. It may be in either move mode or fire mode. If a unit in fire mode attempts a breach, it may not conduct an SFA or move during its action phase. To breach a minefield, the owning player must declare the breach attempt and move the unit in its current mode into the minefield hex if it is not already there. Note that this is a movement-based Overwatch trigger, even though the breaching unit may be in either move mode or fire mode. Resolve any Overwatch fires and artillery attacks normally. If the breaching unit is still in the minefield hex, attack the breaching unit on the 9 column of the fire table, applying only the stacking modifier. If the unit still occupies the minefield hex and is not suppressed or paralyzed, it has successfully created a breach. Place a minefield breach marker in the hex. Units may enter a breached minefield from any direction without being attacked by it. However, units may not use the breach when conducting an SYR. The minefield attacks them normally. Minefield breaches are bottlenecks. And that was another installment of a complete talk-through of the Tactical Combat Series Rules version 4.01. We'll pick up again in a future video with section 22.0 Assault Combat.